Hello and welcome to another Times Radio Members Question and Answer. Today we're answering comments and questions from our channel members on Frontline and other videos about conflicts and their impact on the world stage. I'm Philip Ingram, a former senior British military intelligence officer and now global commentator on all things geopolitics, security and other stuff. Now the first comment that we've had in today is from Greg and it's very interesting. He says, Putin is fast running out of men to fight with. So if Ukraine can push up the daily losses over 2,000 and close to 3,000 a day, surely Putin will have no military to fight with. Greg, that's a very interesting point. We've seen, and this has been confirmed by UK Defence Intelligence, that through 2024, Putin lost between 1,400 and 1,600 troops a day. Now, when I say lost, that is either killed or severely wounded to the point where they have to be taken away from the battlefield, and it's unlikely that they're going to come back again. That's unsustainable in any term. But what we're seeing Putin doing about it is he's heavily recruiting in Africa, and he's using the rump of the Wagner group to do that. He's been recruiting in Yemen and bringing Yemeni troops in. But that's from the Houthi side. However, they're tied up with the conflict with Saudi Arabia and the Saudi Arabian coalition, and of course with the terror tactics that they're carrying out into the Red Sea. And then he's got his initial support from North Korea. And there's been a mutual security agreement signed between Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin. So I think we're going to see more and more North Koreans coming in, which will be virtually impossible to integrate into the Russian military without great changes. It takes a long time to bring different nations in and individuals from different nations and integrate them into a military and then begin to use them in an effective way. So Putin is bleeding. However, it's a race between whether Putin bleeds out from a manpower perspective or the Ukrainians bleed out from a manpower perspective. And Putin doesn't want to go into another mass mobilization across Russia, because that will turn around and affect the Muscovites and the St. Petersburgites rather than those that come from the poorer areas of Russia where he can control the narratives. And Zelensky doesn't want to go down to start recruiting individuals from the age of 18 years old. We don't know the Ukrainian casualty figures. We don't know what state Ukraine is in, but we do know it is not in as good a state as we would hope it to be, but Russia is in a much worse state. And yes, this will set the conditions for someone to come to the end of the fight and will be part of the reason why people go to negotiations. I think getting to 3,000 a day will be very difficult indeed. The maximum we saw in 2024 was just over 2,000 a day, unless the Russians start pushing more and more meat waves forward. I don't think they've got the manpower to do that. So we may see the casualty figures starting to tail off in 2025, but that's because he hasn't got the people. But it is a point that's very well made and something that we have to watch closely. Next comment comes from Steve, who asks, could Belarus leave the Russian orbit? It came close a few years ago. And why can't Russia gain dominance in the air? Well, that's interesting. Belarus is very interesting indeed. Lukashenko, the president of Belarus, he does not want to get his military engaged in Ukraine, primarily because they're the only people that are keeping him in power. We saw quite a few years ago, there was the beginnings of an uprising against him, and he used his military to suppress that very quickly indeed. Putin has kept wanting him to put military capability and give troops to Russia to help them fight in Ukraine. But Lukashenko knows that if he does that, he will lose this ability to keep himself in power. I don't think Lukashenko is going to break away from Putin, and I haven't seen any indications of that. Because if he does that, again, he will lose a lot of the mechanisms that are keeping him in power at the moment, a lot of the levers that he can pull. So that relationship will stay. As Putin starts to feel under more and more pressure, we could see a weakening of that relationship. We could see a fracturing of that relationship, but that would then be a precursor to the breakdown of Belarus completely and Lukashenko being pushed out. And that would be a precursor for a potential breakdown in Putin's power. Going into the why can't Russia gained dominance in the air, and you go on to mention about the aircraft maintenance and continuous supply of spare parts and trained mechanics and skilled pilots and problems with the same aircraft. That's part of it, I think. The Russian supply chain is so corrupt that the spare parts, the mechanics that are properly trained, or the aircraft engineers that are properly trained to keep the aircraft flying just aren't there. The spare parts aren't there to do it, and what spare parts are there are not as reliable as you would hope going into aircraft, because the manufacturing process they've gone through has been subject to so much corruption that the standards that the quality standards that would be needed haven't been met. And Russia, I think, has been exaggerating its capability for such a long period of time. And of course, the aircraft that Russia's got at the moment are being so heavily used that in their maintenance cycles, they should be going through huge maintenance programs. They don't have the capacity for that, both with engineering personnel, the capacity with spare parts. And when it comes to pilots, I haven't seen any indications to suggest that Russia is running out of pilots, but that's probably why they're not risking as many aircraft into the front line and into the air defense traps that the Ukrainians are setting for them. I think through 2025, as the Ukrainians get more Rafale, more F-16s, more Western aircraft capability, then we might see a bigger impact on Russia's ability to fly its air force in a combat scenario. We need to watch out for that very carefully indeed. Next comment comes from Smart Gran. What a great name. I don't know where you're from, Smart Gran, but you say that Zelensky will not compromise. Why should he? He's not a coward. Yep, you're right. He's not going to compromise, I don't think. He will decide what the conditions are for any negotiations. He will decide those from the feeling of the Ukrainian people. And Ukraine has sacrificed so much in this conflict. And no matter what commentators are saying, I think the Ukrainians are winning. And the reason why I think that is most of the commentators are measuring success or failure on the movement on the front line. And the fact that Russia is advancing slowly, and it's been very slowly over the last year, and there's no indication that that's going to stop in the east of Ukraine, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to win. The Ukrainians have had huge success in stopping them advancing any faster. Ukrainians are having some success up in Kursk, and they have just launched a further offensive in Kursk that's making some small progress. But actually where they're having real advantage is at the operational level, destroying Russia's ability to sustain its conflict through attacking the oil refineries, through attacking airfields, through attacking logistic bases, through disrupting the rail supply network, through disrupting and destroying headquarters, through causing huge casualties to the North Koreans that have been trying to fight into Kursk and elsewhere. And then the strategic level. And the strategic level is the positioning of the Ukrainians when it comes to any potential forced negotiations that Trump will bring in when after he's inaugurated on January the 20th. Zelensky is producing a path to peace, giving the right noises about a peace plan. He's put plans out. He sat and talked to Trump. When Trump's team has talked to Putin, Putin's team has doubled down on wanting not just the land that they have got and captured at the moment, but additional land through the disputed Donbass. Putin will not compromise. Zelensky is making all the compromising noises, but Zelensky will have the ability, therefore, to control what's going on. Trump will have to choose which he supports, and he's going to support Zelensky. I think we're going to see Trump coming and giving Zelensky an awful lot more support than he got under Biden. But I hope you don't have to correct me on that. Our next comment's from Neil in Dublin, and Neil says, "Aren't useful idiots in the West the real issue? They will sell their souls for ego claims, and Putin is well able to push them to the limit." Now, Neil, I don't know which angle you're coming from with this, whether you're criticising our approach to Vladimir Putin or you're criticising Putin's approach to the West and exploitation. And I'm going to interpret this, and if I'm wrong, please put that I'm wrong in the comments and we'll answer it again. But I'm going to interpret this from a lot of commentary I'm seeing out of Ireland in particular, where people are accusing the West of warmongering effectively. We should just let Vladimir Putin keep the territory that he's got, stop the casualties, and stop funding the horrors that are war. And war are horrors. I've been in numerous conflicts, and nobody who's ever been anywhere near any conflict would ever want to go to it again. But the real idiots out there, the real idiot is Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin for attacking the international rules-based order by re-invading Ukraine almost 3 years ago, and throwing away many of the international agreements, the Budapest agreements and others that he had signed up to whenever Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons. We can't trust anything that he says. And the difficulty from an international perspective is, and a wider geopolitical perspective, is if we don't stop Putin, then Xi Jinping in China will turn around and say, well, I can take Taiwan by force, and we'll get a link up between the war in Europe, a pivot to Southeast Asia, the bit in the middle is the Middle East that affects everyone, and we'll see Russia, China, Iran and North Korea, this axis of evil coming together and a real potential for global conflict. Where Donald Trump's claims for Greenland, Panama and all the rest of it come in, we'll answer that at a different time. I think he's just playing us at the moment. But the only idiots are those that don't take the global threat seriously, and we need to push Putin out of Ukraine and teach all of the global despots a lesson that you cannot take territory in another country by force just because you want to. Let's hope Donald Trump is listening to that as well as he gets inaugurated on January the 20th. Going on next, a final couple of points from Graham. And Graham, thank you very much indeed. It's always good to hear from Philip Ingram. Great show. Thanks, James. Well, thank you for watching and thank you for subscribing. And Nick replies, agreed. I fervently hope it's right about the possibility of Trump taking a position against Russia that Russia doesn't like. The comment I made earlier. Let's hope, Nick, that you and I are both right in this. But thanks once again for watching Q&A and for posting your questions. Remember, I'll quite happily accept more positive comments about the show. If you've got any questions, put them in the comments below and we'll answer them next week or the week after. And even if it's just a comment or a question or anything else, put it in there. But remember, if you want access to exclusive videos and have your questions answered, please sign up for a Times Radio membership. Thank you very much indeed.